September 7th, 1996. Letna Park Stadium, Prague. The evening air was thick with anticipation and the distant sound of 65,000 voices chanting in unison. Michael Jackson stood behind the massive stage setup, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his golden history tour jacket for what felt like the 100th time. The military-style garment, with its intricate embroidery and gleaming golden details, felt heavier than usual tonight, weighted not just with fabric, but with expectation. The months leading up to this moment had been a blur of preparation and anxiety. The History album had sparked both celebration and controversy, touching on themes of media persecution and personal struggle in ways that felt raw and necessary. But translating that emotional complexity into a live performance for 65,000 people felt like an impossible task. Michael had spent countless hours in rehearsal studios, perfecting every movement, every vocal inflection, every moment of the show. Yet standing here now, surrounded by the largest production setup he'd ever commissioned, he felt utterly unprepared. In just 10 minutes, he would walk out in front of 65,000 screaming fans for the opening night of what would become the largest solo artist stadium tour in history. But what Michael didn't know was that tonight would change everything he thought he knew about performing. For the first time in his career, Michael would see himself the way his audience saw him, larger than life, magnified on massive video screens that towered over the stadium like digital monuments. And that moment of recognition would trigger something inside the King of Pop that no one, not even his closest friends, had ever witnessed before. "Michael, are you ready?" His tour director, Jamie King, called out from the wings. "The crowd has been chanting your name for 20 minutes straight." Michael nodded, but his eyes were fixed on something that both fascinated and terrified him. Two enormous LED video screens, each roughly the size of a large movie theater screen, flanked the stage. These technological marvels represented the cutting edge of 1990s concert production. Massive investments in equipment that had never been tested at this scale for a solo artist performance. The screens were capable of displaying crystal-clear images with a brightness and resolution that previous generations of video technology simply couldn't match. But they also represented something more threatening to Michael: complete transparency. These weren't like anything he'd ever performed with before. During the Jackson 5 days, during the Thriller era, even during the Bad and Dangerous tours, technology like this simply didn't exist. The biggest screens they'd used before were barely larger than small television monitors, positioned far enough from the audience that they served as decoration rather than windows into the performer's soul. The evolution from those modest displays to these towering video walls represented more than just technological progress. It was a fundamental shift in the relationship between artist and audience. The technical crew had spent days calibrating these screens, adjusting color temperatures and brightness levels to ensure that every nuance of Michael's performance would be captured and displayed with unforgiving accuracy. Lead video director Patricia Santos had worked with major rock acts throughout the decade, but even she admitted that the History setup pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. The cameras positioned around the stage were broadcast quality units, normally used for television production, each operated by professionals who understood how to anticipate a performer's movements and frame shots that would enhance the artistic moment. "Those screens," Michael whispered to himself, "they're going to show everything." The technology revolution that Michael faced that night was about to expose every emotion, every vulnerability, every human moment to 65,000 people in real time. At 38 years old, Michael Jackson was at the absolute peak of his artistic powers. The History album had debuted at #1 worldwide. He'd spent 2 years planning this tour, designing every detail, every effect, every moment. But standing there that night, watching the technical crew do final tests on the video screens, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a child performing with his brothers: pure, unfiltered stage fright. Michael, his longtime friend and makeup artist, Karen Fay, approached him carefully. She had worked with Michael for over a decade, perfecting the subtle techniques that would make his features look flawless under stage lights and helping him prepare mentally for countless performances. But tonight felt different. The usual pre-show energy was there, But underneath it was a current of anxiety that Karen had rarely seen in Michael, even during the most challenging periods of his career. "You look pale. Are you okay?" she asked, studying his face with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to read his moods and needs. "Karen, have you seen those screens?" Michael pointed toward the massive displays that were currently showing test patterns, geometric shapes, and color bars that the technical crew used for calibration. "They're going to magnify every expression, every movement. The audience will see things that even I don't see. Every time I've performed before, there's been a barrier between me and the crowd. Distance, lighting, staging. But these screens..." He trailed off, unable to articulate the vulnerability he was feeling. Karen had seen Michael nervous before major performances, but this was something deeper. She recognized it as the same anxiety he'd expressed during recording sessions, when he felt the material was too personal, too revealing. "Michael, you've performed for millions of people over the years. What makes this different?" "It's not about the people," Michael said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It's about the intimacy. When I'm on a normal stage, there's mystery. The audience fills in the gaps with their imagination. But these screens, they're going to show me the way I see myself in the mirror at 3 in the morning. Every doubt, every moment of uncertainty, every human flaw." What Michael was experiencing wasn't just nervousness about a new tour. For the first time in his career, technology was advancing faster than his comfort zone. The massive video screens meant that every fan, even those in the farthest seats, would see him in crystal clear, larger-than-life detail. Every emotion would be amplified. Every imperfection would be visible. Every vulnerable moment would be shared with 65,000 people simultaneously. This was the moment Michael Jackson realized that fame had entered a new dimension, one where privacy, even on stage, no longer existed. "5 minutes, Michael?" Jamie called out again. Michael walked to the edge of the stage and peered through a gap in the curtain. The sea of faces stretched beyond what his eyes could take in. 65,000 people, more people than lived in many entire towns. They were holding signs, wearing his iconic outfits, some crying with anticipation. The energy was electric, but it was also overwhelming in a way Michael had never experienced. "They're not just here to hear music," Michael thought to himself. "They're here to see me, to connect with me, to feel something. And now with these screens, they'll see more of me than I've ever shown anyone." Michael had always been a perfectionist, obsessing over every detail of his performances. But the massive video screens meant that level of control was partially out of his hands. The cameras would catch spontaneous moments, unguarded expressions, human reactions that couldn't be choreographed or rehearsed. "Michael, we need to start." Jamie approached with a headset around his neck. "The crowd is getting restless." "Jamie," Michael said, his voice barely audible over the roar from the stadium, "what if they see too much? What if the screens show things I don't want them to see?" Jamie looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Michael struggled to find the words. "For 27 years, I've controlled exactly how the audience sees me. The lighting, the choreography, the costumes, the distance from the crowd. But those screens, they're going to show my eyes, my face, my real expressions. What if they see that I'm scared? What if they see that I'm human?" At that moment, Michael Jackson was grappling with a fear that every performer faces but rarely admits: the terror of being truly seen. Jamie placed a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. "Michael, that's exactly why they love you. Because underneath everything, you're human. And if those screens show that, it'll make tonight even more special." The opening notes of Scream began pumping through the massive sound system. Michael knew he had to make a decision. He could perform the show the way he always had, trying to control every angle, every expression, or he could surrender to the technology and let 65,000 people see him as he truly was. Michael closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a choice that would change his approach to performing forever. "Let's do this," he whispered. What happened next would create the most emotionally powerful performance of Michael Jackson's entire career. As the curtain dropped and Michael stepped into the spotlight, the crowd's roar was deafening. But for a split second, Michael was frozen. Because there, on the massive screens surrounding the stadium, was his own face, magnified to impossible proportions, visible to every single person in the venue. For the first time in his life, Michael Jackson was seeing himself the way his audience saw him. The screens showed his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and vulnerability. They showed the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for the microphone. They showed the moment of pure, unguarded humanity before the performance mask slipped into place. But instead of being terrified by this exposure, Michael felt something unexpected. He felt connected. Oh my God, he thought, they can see me, really see me, and they're still cheering. The opening dance sequence for Scream was more intense than it had ever been in rehearsal. Michael threw himself into the choreography with an abandon that surprised even his backup dancers. But every few seconds, his eyes would flick to the video screens, watching his own performance in real time. What he saw amazed him. The screens captured moments of pure artistic expression that Michael himself had never witnessed. The way his face lit up during a particularly complex dance move, the genuine smile that crossed his face when he heard the crowd singing along, the intensity in his eyes when he hit a powerful vocal note. For the first time, Michael Jackson was experiencing what it felt like to be his own audience. During the third song, In the Closet, something extraordinary happened. As Michael performed one of his signature spins, he caught sight of himself on the main video screen and stopped mid-move. The massive image showed him mid-spin, jacket flaring, an expression of pure joy on his face that was completely unguarded and authentic. The crowd noticed the pause and began cheering even louder. Michael looked up at the screen again, then at the audience, then back at the screen. A slow smile spread across his face as he realized something profound. They're not just watching a show, Michael thought. They're sharing this moment with me. They can see what I'm feeling, and they're feeling it too. Michael walked to the center of the stage directly under the main camera and looked straight up into the lens. On the screens throughout the stadium, his face appeared larger than life, vulnerable, grateful, and completely present. Prague, Michael called out, his voice carrying clearly through the stadium sound system. Can you see me? The crowd erupted. But Michael wasn't just asking if they could physically see him. He was asking if they could see him, the real him, beyond the choreography and the costume and the performance. The answer came back in a roar that seemed to shake the entire stadium. What happened next turned a concert into a communion between artist and audience. For the rest of the show, Michael performed with a freedom and authenticity that none of his crew had ever witnessed. He played to the cameras, yes, but not in a calculated way. He allowed the screens to capture spontaneous moments of joy, vulnerability, and connection. The screens captured moments of spontaneous joy when children in the audience made him laugh. They showed his genuine amazement when entire stadiums sang, "Heal the World," in perfect harmony. They revealed his exhaustion, his exhilaration, his gratitude, and his humanity. During Black or White, when he saw children in the front rows singing along on the video screens, Michael stopped singing for a full verse and just listened to the crowd. The massive displays showed him smiling, tears forming in his eyes as he heard 65,000 people singing his words back to him. During Earth Song, the cameras caught Michael's face during the song's environmental message, and the screens revealed an expression of such genuine passion and concern that several audience members later said it was the moment they truly understood what the song meant to him. But the most powerful moment came during She's Out of My Life, a song Michael rarely performed live because of its emotional intensity. As he sang the heartbreaking ballad, the video screens captured every emotion playing across his face. The audience could see him reliving whatever personal experience had inspired the song. They could see him fighting back tears. They could see him being completely, vulnerably human. When his voice cracked during the final chorus, something that had happened in the studio recording years earlier, the live cameras caught the authentic emotion on his face. Instead of being embarrassed, Michael looked up at the screen showing his own vulnerability and smiled through his tears. The entire stadium fell silent, except for Michael's voice and the sound of 65,000 people crying along with him. In that moment, the massive video screens had done something impossible. They had made a stadium feel intimate. After the show backstage, Michael sat in his dressing room, still in his performance clothes, staring at a monitor that was playing back moments from the concert. "I've never seen myself like that," he told Karen Fay, who was helping him remove his makeup. "Those screens, they showed things I didn't even know I was expressing." "How do you feel about that?" Karen asked gently. Michael was quiet for a long moment, watching the playback of himself performing Man in the Mirror. On the screen, he could see his own face magnified to enormous proportions, every emotion clearly visible to the audience. "Terrified," Michael said honestly, and liberated. The History World Tour would go on to break every existing record for a solo artist stadium tour. 83 concerts across 58 cities, with over 4.5 million people in attendance. But what made it legendary wasn't just the size or the production value. It was the intimacy that Michael discovered that first night in Prague. The massive video screens had forced Michael Jackson to perform without masks, and the result was the most emotionally powerful tour of his career. Night after night, city after city, Michael continued to push himself to be more authentic, more vulnerable, more human in front of the cameras. He learned to use the technology not as a barrier between himself and the audience, but as a bridge. Fans who attended History Tour concerts often said the same thing. "It felt like Michael was performing just for me." The massive video screens had created the impossible, a personal connection between one man and tens of thousands of people simultaneously. Michael's relationship with technology had changed forever. Instead of trying to control every image, every angle, every expression, he had learned to collaborate with the cameras, to trust them to capture authentic moments that connected him with his audience in ways he had never imagined possible. The young man who had started performing when television was still new had learned to embrace a digital age that would change entertainment forever. By the end of the History World Tour in October 1997, Michael had performed for over 4.5 million people. But more importantly, he had shown 4.5 million people something they had never seen before: a global superstar being completely, authentically human. The tour's impact extended far beyond music. Video concert technology exploded in popularity after History. The idea of using massive screens to create intimacy in huge venues became standard practice for major artists. Michael had accidentally pioneered a new form of performance art, one where technology enhanced rather than replaced human connection. Today, every major concert features massive video screens. Every artist performs knowing that their every expression will be magnified and shared with thousands of people simultaneously. But few have mastered the art of using that technology to create genuine intimacy the way Michael did during the History World Tour. Michael Jackson's first night facing those massive video screens in Prague changed more than just his own performance style. It changed the relationship between artists and audiences forever. Years later, when asked about the History Tour, Michael would say, "For the first time, I saw myself the way my audience sees me. And I realized that what they wanted to see wasn't perfection. They wanted to see connection. They wanted to see me." The massive video screens that had initially terrified Michael became his greatest allies in creating that connection. They allowed 65,000 people to see the tears in his eyes during "She's Out of My Life." They let audiences worldwide witness his genuine joy during Black or White. They captured the moment when the king of pop realized that being human wasn't something to hide from his audience. It was exactly what his audience was hoping to see. That September night in Prague, when Michael Jackson first saw himself on those towering video screens, he made a choice that would define the rest of his performing career. He chose vulnerability over perfection. He chose connection over control. He chose to let 65,000 people see him exactly as he was. And in doing so, he created the template for authentic performance in the digital age. The History World Tour wasn't just the biggest solo artist stadium tour in history. It was the moment when live performance discovered how to be both massive and intimate, both technological and human, both perfectly produced and completely authentic. Michael Jackson stepped onto that Prague stage terrified that the massive video screens would expose too much of him to his audience. He left that stage having discovered that exposing his humanity was exactly what his audience had been waiting to see. That's not just a concert. That's a revolution. That's the night Michael Jackson taught the world that technology and authenticity don't have to be enemies. They can be partners in creating the deepest possible connection between an artist and the people who love their work. Sometimes the most terrifying leap is exactly the one that teaches us to fly.